Okay, today we will do a topic that is double circulation. That means it is the process of the blood that it is flowing through the heart. So before going to the topic, let me discuss about the components. The components of the transport system. So, the first is that we know that heart is the chief component, it is the most vital organ that is involved in the transport system of the human. So, actually heart is acting as a pumping organ because it will go to pump the blood so that blood can enter the different regions of our body. So, our heart is basically having, this is the structure of the heart, where our heart is basically having 4 chambers. So our heart is 4 chambers. This is the left atrium of our heart. This is the left ventricle of our heart. Okay. This is the right atrium, and this is the right ventricle. So, atriums are the upper chambers of the heart. What is the function of atrium? They will collect the blood from the different parts of our body, from different organs. Then what it will do? It will just send the blood to the ventricle. So, the ventricle is taking the blood from the atrium. Then what will happen? The ventricle will pump the blood to the different parts of our body. Okay. So, let me discuss. This is the heart. In between the atrium, we are finding there is a septum is present. That is called the interatrial septum. That means it is present between the 2 atrium. Similarly, the 2 ventricles are also separated by a septum, which is called the interventricular septum. So it is keeping the 4 chambers of our heart, or the atrium and the left chambers and the right chambers of our heart to get separated from each other. Okay. So, at first, this is the heart. Then, we know, so we have done one thing, the most vital organ of the blood circulatory system, that is the heart. Then, there will be blood vessels. So, the blood vessels are the vessels by which blood is flowing, or within which the blood is flowing. We will find there are basically 3 types of the blood vessel. The first one is called artery. So, artery is that blood vessel which will keep or which will carry the blood from heart to the different parts of our body. Second, there is vein. So, the vein will take the blood from the different parts of our body back to the heart. Okay. And there is a third blood vessel which is called capillaries. So, capillary is very vital because it will help in the exchange of the nutrients, exchange of the gases in between the blood and the tissue. So, we can draw it like, suppose we have heart here. Okay. So, there will be a blood vessel that is called the artery. So what the artery will do? Artery will take the blood from the heart and it will just supply to the different organs. So suppose, okay, I am just doing it below. Okay. So from the heart, blood will be collected by the artery and it will be sent to the different organs. Okay. Suppose here the tissues or the organs of our bodies are present. Suppose this is the tissue, or you can say organ, because we know the tissues will go to form the organ. So, heart is giving the blood by the help of the artery to the tissues. Now what happens? When the artery is moving toward a tissue, you can find that the artery will now get converted into fine branches. it will form several branches. These branches of the arteries are called the arterioles. So here the blood will enter, it can enter, suppose in this blood oxygen is present. So that oxygen can move here inside the tissue. Okay. Then what will happen, we know that our tissue will go to produce CO2 by the process of respiration, which we will discuss in the another process. So we know the tissues are generating CO2s. This CO2 will be collected by this very tiny blood vessels which are called the venules, and this will be taken these venules will go to join and they will go to form a vein. They will go to form a vein. So we can write this is the vein. Look what happens, the CO2 that the tissue was producing, it is entering into the capillaries, it is passing through the vein and ultimately to the heart. So we got these two artery, this is the artery, which is transporting the blood from heart to the different portions of our body. We got vein, which is carrying the blood from the different organs back to the heart. Then what will be about the capillary? It is the junction, or you can say it is the intermixing of the artery and the veins. Arteries are divided into arterioles, veins are divided or branches into the venules. Both of them are joined and they will go to form a capillary. So capillary's main function is to transport the different substances between the blood and the organ. So these are the chief components of our circulatory system. Another component is also there which we cannot actually avoid, that is our blood. So blood is actually the body fluid. This is that fluid which helps to transport the different substances from one part of the body to the other part. Suppose we are taking oxygen, it will be transported from the lungs to the different parts of our body, different cells of our body. We know different cells of our body is generating CO2. We know how much harmful is CO2 for us. So the CO2s can be carried by, again, the body fluid blood to the different portions of our body, particularly to the lungs. So from the different portions of our body, CO2s will be generated. It will be carried by this blood, particularly by the vein, to the back to the heart. From the heart, by the lungs, it will go to the outside. So this is basically the components of our blood distributor system. Now, in the structure of the heart, we will find that there is some arteries. Like this is the left atrium. Here, a particular blood vessel is there, which is connecting this left atrium with the lungs. That means we can write here lungs. So from the lungs this vessel is joined, and this is actually called the pulmonary vein. So this is called the pulmonary vein. The pulmonary vein which carries the blood from lungs to the left atrium. Now we found that the left atrium, the left ventricle is present. In between the left atrium and left ventricle, there is the presence of a valve which is called bicuspid valve. Bicuspid valve. Okay. Then what happens? The blood enters into the left ventricle. Then from the left ventricle, it is just moving through an artery, and this artery will drain this blood to the different portions of our body. This artery is actually called aorta, or sometimes it is also known as the systemic aorta. So this is about the some parts. Then what happens? This is our right atrium. What happens? Right atrium is taking the blood from two portions. Okay, our body is producing the carbon dioxide, and the carbon dioxide containing blood is known as the deoxygenated blood. This deoxygenated blood is taken by the lower portions of our body, also from the upper portions of our body. When it is taken by the lower portions of our body, it will be taken by a vena cava, which is called, this one will be inferior vena cava. So this inferior vena cava is taking the deoxygenated blood from the lower parts of our body. So the upper parts of our body, just upper parts of our heart, there is a vena cava or a vein that is called the superior vena cava. This superior vena cava is taking the deoxygenated blood from the upper portions of our body. It is giving back to the right atrium. So from the right atrium it will enter to the right ventricle. Same in between the right atrium and right ventricle, there will be the presence of another valve. That valve is known as the tricuspid valve. So this is about the tricuspid valve. Okay. Then the blood will enter to the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, a particular artery is originating, that is called the pulmonary artery. This pulmonary artery will take this blood back to the lungs. So this is the different blood vessels that are associated with the heart. We can now go to the topic that is the double circulation of the blood, how the blood is basically circulated. So before doing that, we have to know one thing, that the different chambers of our hearts are contracting and sometimes they are relaxing. The contraction of the heart, it is called systole. So we will familiar with two terms. One is the systole. What do you mean by the systole? It is the contraction of chambers of heart. And another thing will be there which is called diastole. So diastole, it is called relaxation or expansion of the chambers of heart. These two are very important because when we found that how the blood, these things are occurring. When the chambers of the heart are doing systole, that means when they are contracting, the blood will be pushed, the blood will be pumped so that the blood will now enter into the next chamber. Okay, and when the chambers of our heart are relaxing, that means they are relaxed. They will take the blood inside them. Okay, so when the chambers of the hearts are relaxing, they are taking the blood, that means it will be the diastole. When they are contracting, that means they will push the blood, they will pump the blood to the different parts of our body at that time. Okay, so then we can move to the process, this particular process. Let's come here. So, at first, what we have, I am just drawing it here so that it will be better understandable. Suppose this is the respiratory tract or the respiratory passage. This is our respiratory system. There is the pharynx, there is the larynx, then it will start with the trachea. Suppose this is the trachea. Our trachea is having several branches or two branches, that is called the bronchi. So this is about the structure of the respiratory system or lungs that we will gonna discuss on another classes. So suppose this is our respiratory system. Now what happens? We know this is the lungs. And it is very important that our lungs, the alveoli of our lungs is associated with the blood vessels. Here the capillaries are present. Okay. So we know what the capillary is. Minute blood vessels are present here. I'm just doing this for you. Now look what happens. Whenever we are inhaling, that means when we are taking the oxygen through our nose. When we are inhaling, the oxygen is passed to the lungs. Okay, this is the capillary. We know that it is the capillary which is associated with the lungs. So this capillary will take this oxygenated blood. Okay, there is a particular vein which is called the pulmonary vein. Here it is also given. This is the pulmonary vein. So that the oxygen is entering inside the lungs, from the pulmonary vein it is entering into the heart. So we can do a heart here. Very rough diagram of the heart I am just doing. So what happens? This deoxygenated, this oxygenated blood, the pulmonary vein is carrying the blood which is filled with oxygen or which carries oxygen. So this blood is called oxygenated blood. The blood where oxygen is present. So here the oxygenated blood is basically entering through the pulmonary vein directly inside this particular atrium. So we know this is the left atrium, this is the right atrium. So here we have this left atrium, where it is basically gradually filled within the left atrium. Then what happens when the left atrium is completely filled with the blood? Then what will happen? Here the left atrium is completely filled with the blood. That means at first the left atrium present in the relaxation phase, that was in the diastole phase, it was taking the blood. Then it is pumping the blood inside the ventricle. So now it gradually enters inside the ventricle. Okay. Then what will happen? This particular blood from the ventricle will just follow this path. This path. So what is present here? We'll do it. This particular artery is called systemic aorta. This systemic aorta will take this oxygenated blood and ultimately it will just send this blood into the capillaries. So the capillaries can carry this oxygen and they can transmit this particular oxygen to the tissues which are present just below where the tissues are present. Or you can see the different organs are present. So this is the tissue. So here the systemic aorta is taking the oxygen containing blood and it is transporting into the capillary. From the capillary, oxygen is entering inside the tissue. We know in our body respiration is occurring. What is respiration? The glucose. It will burn in the presence of this oxygen. It will produce CO2, uske saath energy and water. We know the CO2 which is formed, it is very harmful for us. So that this CO2 will now given back to the capillaries. Who will collect? The veins will collect this. So we know here the venules are also present. The venules are also present here, right? They will collect this carbon dioxide containing blood, this CO2. It will enter inside this capillary. So the vein will take this. So this particular veins, what are the name of these veins? The superior and the inferior vena cava that we have studied previously. So we can write these are the vena cava, which will carry the deoxygenated blood. That is the blood which is very poor in oxygen, which contains a huge amount of CO2. Deoxygenated blood gradually enters at first the left atrium, at first the right atrium. Then we know that in between the right atrium and right ventricle, there is the presence of the tricuspid valves. So tricuspid valve gradually opens. It will just give the blood from the atrium to the ventricle. Then what happens? From the ventricle, a vein is there, which will carry this deoxygenated blood back to the lungs. So this will carry this deoxygenated blood back to the lungs. This particular artery, which is taking this deoxygenated blood from heart to the lungs, is called pulmonary vein. So this is the vein which is taking the blood from heart to the lungs, pulmonary vein. Now what happens? The CO2, this blood is actually contains CO2 as we have studied. Here the CO2 was entering, the CO2 was transmitting by lungs. So the CO2 containing blood is now entering inside the lungs. That means the CO2 will be present here, which will gradually move and it will be exhaled out from the nose. So this is actually called the double circulation. Why? Because we can count that in our heart, the blood is flowing twice in a one cycle. There will be a single cycle. This entire activity is actually within a single cycle. But within the single cycle, the blood is flowing twice in our heart. So that is why it is called the double circulation. So this is about the double circulation. So we can count in the left side. The left side, the oxygenated blood is flowing. Oxygen was flowing from the lungs through the pulmonary vein to the left atrium to left ventricle through aorta to the different parts of our body. Different parts of our body was generating CO2 that will be carried by the superior inferior vena cavas. It will enter into the right atrium, then to the right ventricle, then by the pulmonary artery back to the lungs. So from the lungs, the CO2 will just go out. So this is about the double circulation. So one thing which is very associated, which is very related with the double circulation, that how the chambers of the heart can do systole, how they can do diastole. Because there are some special tissues that are present in our heart chambers. Let me erase this. There are some special tissues that are present in our heart that are called the nodal tissues. We know that the heart is made up of the cardiac muscle. Okay, this particular area, this is the right atrium. The upper right side of the right atrium is having a particular node. This node is called a node, or it is also called sinoatrial node. Is a for sinoatrial node. Another nodal tissue is present just at the lower left side of the right atrium. This particular node is called AV node, or it is called atrioventricular node. What is this node? These nodes are able to generate some electrical impulses. We will do in detail in some next classes. So, this particular tissues are able to generate some electrical impulses by the process of depolarization. Okay, so that they will do the first depolarization. So what will happen? They are getting excited and they are just giving this stimulus to the different regions also. So this AC node was first generating an electrical impulse. It will be transmitted to this AV node, also to this particular atrium. Okay, so the first was the right atrium where the AC node was present. It was generating some electrical impulses which will enter into the, which will transmit to the AV node which is present in the right atrium, and it will also transmit these impulses to the left atrium also. Okay. Then what will happen? Just coming from the AV node, a bundle arises, a particular bundle. In some book it is given as the AV bundle, in some book it is given as the bundle of these. This is a bundle of fibers. These bundles are now entering through the ventricles. This bundle is now entering through both of the ventricles. It is innervating this ventricles. This bundle is basically called the His bundle. So what happened? AC node was starting the electrical impulses. It will be transmitted into the AV node. From AV node it will be carried by the bundle of His. Then through the bundle of His it will be transmitted to the ventricle. So these fibers are called the Purkinje. Okay. This is the cause of the systematic or rhythmic contraction and relaxation of the different chambers of the body. Okay. It is found that when AC node that was doing the depolarization, at that time the atriums were contracting. It is found that when AV node was transmitting this electrical impulses through bundle of His to the ventricles, at that time the ventricles are contracting. That means when there will be depolarization, then there will be the generation of the electrical impulses. At that time, there will be the contraction of the different chambers of heart. Alright. So this entire process can be summed up into a particular cycle that is called the cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle means the entire sequence of events that was taken place in the process of double circulation, that is called the cardiac cycle. It is having three phases. The first is the joint diastole. The joint diastole means when both the atriums and the ventricles are in diastole mode, they are in expanding mode, they were taking just the blood from the different parts of the body. Okay. So that is the joint diastole. That means both the diastole of the atrium and both the ventricles. And it is basically taking 0.4 millisecond, 0.4 second of time. Okay. Then there is, just after the joint diastole, what will happen? The blood will enter into the left and the right atrium. Because they were in the relaxed state first, okay, it is found that when they are fully filled with the blood, what they will do? Here, the AC node that will produce the depolarization, that will produce the electrical impulse. So these chambers are now contracting. So when the atriums are contracting, what will happen? We are doing the systole. This is called atrial systole. So atrial systole basically lasts for 0.1 second. Okay. When they are doing the systole, they were just pumping the blood inside the ventricle, right? So after that the ventricle gradually filled up. When the ventricle gradually filled up, what happens? The AC node at that time was also generating the impulse which was transmitted by the bundle of His to the Purkinje fibers. The Purkinje fibers were innervating the ventricles. So during that time, the ventricles are also contracting, the ventricles are also undergoing systole. So when the ventricles will undergo the systole, what the ventricles will do? It will just pump the blood through the arteria vein. It will pump the blood through the aorta, it will pump the blood to the pulmonary artery to the lungs. So this is called ventricular systole. That will take 0.3 seconds of time. So the complete sequence of event which is occurring in a single cycle of the double circulation, that is called the Payel cycle, which is having this 3 phases. We can also do a very little thing here, that is the ECG. ECG, electrocardiogram. It is a graphical representation where we can just do where we can determine the relaxation, the expansion or the contraction of the different chambers of the blood. Okay, so it is the graphical representation where we can represent the systole and the diastole of the blood. So it is having some waves like this. The first is that the P wave, then there is the Q, R, S, and then there will be the T. The P wave, this wave will strongly suggest the atrial systole. That means during this time, the SN node, this was doing the depolarization. It was generating the electrical impulse, so that the atrium was undergoing the systole. Then there is the QRS complex. This is also called QRS complex. It is indicating the ventricular systole. Ventricular systole means ventricle is doing the systole. Where this electrical impulse will be transmitted from every node to the different regions of the ventricle. And the last will be the T wave. This T wave, the end of the T wave, that will do here the complete end of atrial and ventricular systole. यानी कि यहाँ पे ventricular and atrial systole is getting completed. Then the joint diastole will be started. So this curve is basically called the ECG or the electrocardiogram. So this is about the topic. Okay, let us discuss some questions, 1 or 2 questions that were coming in the NEET. So let me do the first question. QRS complex in a standard ECG represents options: depolarization of auricles, B, depolarization of ventricles, C, repolarization of ventricles, D, repolarization of auricles. ये NEET 2020 का question. Okay, so the QRS complex in a standard ECG represents क्या होता है QRS complex क्या suggest कर रहा है ventricular systole को suggest कर रहा है क्या होगा there will be depolarization of the ventricle. So we know that when there will be depolarization of the ventricle, at that time it will do the systole, it will do the contraction. So this will be the answer. Okay. Okay, then we can do another question. A spatial nodal tissue locate in lower corner of right atrium, close to atrioventricular septum, that delays the spreading of impulses to heart apex for about 0.1 second. The delay allows the following. Options क्या है? Blood to enter out the ventricles to empty, completely, blood to enter pulmonary artery, and last one, the atria to empty complete. So here a special donor tissue that is embedded in the lower corner of the right atrium, and it is close to the atrioventricular septum, the septum between the atrium and the ventricle. This is the atrioventricular septum that delays the spreading of the impulses about 0.1 second. So ये क्या करेगा? Blood to enter out बिल्कुल नहीं, क्योंकि ये जब generate करेगा electrical impulses को, तब क्या होगा? The atrium will do the contraction. By the contraction, the blood will be coming from atrium to the ventricle. यानी कि the correct option, the correct answer will be the atria to empty complete. So this will be the answer. Okay? So today this was up to you.